So when sitting with your own pain or sitting with someone else's, it can be helpful to engage in a physical practice that I learned about from Elizabeth Stanley, who's a veteran, and she's an excellent researcher who focuses on trauma healing for soldiers and others. And this practice is called ground and release, and it's very simple. It sounds too simple, but it's powerful if you can practice it, especially in intense emotional situations. If you're sitting in a chair, which you probably will be when you're speaking with someone, focus on the points of contact with the chair, okay? So if you're sitting in a chair normally, probably that would be your backside, the backs of your legs, and your feet on the floor are making contact with the chair or with the floor. So focus on those points where you feel the contact. You can do it right now if you want to practice it. And then focus on the physical sensations of your body touching the chair. Is it warm? Is it cold? Do you feel pressure or sweatiness or tingling? And then focus on the qualities of the chair as well. Is it firm? Is it soft, scratchy, smooth? Focus on the solidity now and the support of the chair holding you up. And as you focus on that, do you feel yourself almost wanting to sigh, relaxing, being present, not being carried away by thought or emotion? This can be really helpful. As simple as it sounds, kind of toggling back and forth between maybe witnessing painful emotions, whether it's yours or someone else's, being in an intense situation, and then feeling physically grounded and connected to your surroundings, to the chair, to the floor. It can be really helpful to enable you to stay present, to stay regulated, even in intense situations. So we're sitting, right? We're not saving. Of course, you're going to want to say the perfect thing that relieves your friend's suffering and saves them, right? But there's no silver bullet to eradicate complex pain. There's no quick fix for trauma. Wounds take time to heal. And if your friend experiences healing and growth, which we hope they do, right, it will not be overnight, and it won't be primarily because of you or anything that you did or said, but it will be through their own work, by God's grace, witnessed and perhaps facilitated by you through the sharing of space and making space for the expression of their grief. But you can relax into your chair. Your job is not to save, it's to be present. Just breathe, right? Feel the chair holding you up. Remember that your presence, even just your presence, your regulated presence, is a resource. Just keep sitting. So let's move on to our second pointer for helping immigrants process grief. We have sit more than save, right? That's number one. And then we have number two is listen more than talk, especially at first. So this involves the things you would expect, the things that you know about good listening. This is building rapport through mirroring. This is allowing pauses without immediately jumping in. Remember, you can always, if you're wanting to jump in, you can breathe, think about your contact points, you can stay present, just stay with it. Ask questions that show you've been listening. The Trauma Healing Institute, which I'll talk more about later, and they're the ones that taught me the term wound of the heart to refer to trauma. They suggest 3 questions that will help someone to fully express a traumatic experience or a hard story. These are the 3 questions. Number 1, what happened? Now, this seems really simple, but this just allows them, gives them space to tell the story, and it kind of orients you as the listener. So what happened? Number 2 is, how did you feel? So this sort of gets under the story, right? To figure out how it's still affecting them. What are the emotions that are present when they recall this story? What were the emotions that were present at the time? This gives you a deeper insight into how it's affecting them. And then number 3, what was the hardest part? This is a really good question because it helps them to sort of assess the damage that's been done by this experience, and then to articulate their most intense grief. And again, it sort of orients you as the listener. What's the hardest part of all this? So these questions don't have to be deployed in like a journalistic, just the facts, ma'am, kind of way, 1, 2, 3, but they're helpful to remember as tools to make space for fully sharing a past memory and its attendant grief, and then how it also is affecting the present of your immigrant friend. So you don't have to be worried about getting your 2 cents in, by the way. I used to worry about this a lot. I don't as much anymore. In my experience, the times that I've remembered my own advice, that's not always, but the times I've remembered and the times I've been a supportive listener without doing a lot of talking initially, my immigrant friend generally will either get to a point where they sigh and they say, I feel a lot better now after talking about it. And this is without me having said much at all. Or they ask a question back to me after saying all of their words on the subject, like, so what do you think? Or have you felt that way? And then that shows me that this is the appropriate time to speak, if necessary, or if it seems helpful to my immigrant friend. And this leads us to our third pointer, last pointer in helping immigrant friends process grief. Number 3 is connect on emotions more than on circumstances. So let's talk about sharing your own experiences. There's a way to do this that is trivializing of your immigrant friends' experiences, but there's also a way to do this that is deeply healthy and that leads to deeper friendship and to mutual healing compared to just one-way sharing, you just listening rather than also sharing. So sometimes we can be, let's talk about kind of the wrong way to do this first. Sometimes we can be so eager to connect, and maybe we're feeling nervous, so we kind of talk a lot, and we want to just kind of equate our friends' circumstances with our own somehow. And this usually doesn't turn out well because likely your experiences are not an exact mirror of their experiences. And so it can feel sort of dismissive and trivializing, kind of like if someone said something to you, something like, oh, your mom died, my cat died. You see they're trying to be sympathetic, but it's just those circumstances are not the same. So this is where the question, how did you feel, is so helpful to you as a listener. We can connect with someone, even whose circumstances are different than our own, on an emotional level, because to feel is human. To feel love, fear, anger, sadness, disgust, joy, these are the common denominators of the experience of being human, even if circumstances are different. So I can't tell you exactly how to connect emotionally. It's sort of more of an art than a science, and I believe you can be intuitively guided by the Holy Spirit in the moment if you're willing to sit with your friend and listen to them and listen to the Holy Spirit at the same time. But I can say that some of the most powerful cross-cultural friendships and interactions that I have ever experienced, now this is stumbling and bumbling through awkwardness, mind you, have been the times when I both listened to someone else's story and then also shared my own. And there was a shared emotion in it. We connected on the emotion. I remember a few instances where I was going through a very hard time in my life, and my immigrant friend was as well. And we did not have the same circumstances whatsoever, nor did we pretend that we did at all. But we kind of discovered that underneath the circumstances, we had similar emotions. It turned out that we both were feeling a sense of vulnerability, that we knew that nothing is guaranteed in this life. In terms of what will happen next. We had sort of a sense of disillusionment and confusion that life was not turning out how we had expected it to. We sort of had an uncertainty of, how am I going to live from now on? Where am I going to go from here? From listening, I found out that her feelings underneath her circumstances were very similar to my own. And so I was able to share my circumstances with her and connect on that emotional level. And in that instance, I was able to share how my faith in Jesus was being challenged, but then at the same time strengthened through the trials that I was experiencing. And she was a believer. She shared similar things with me. We prayed together. but this is just one instance I'm sharing with you. I think that there can be interactions like this even with non-believers as well in slightly different ways, since human emotion is a universal language and a connecting point. So a quick note for when you don't feel an emotional connection with what someone is sharing, you don't feel like it would be appropriate for you to share a similar emotion, that's fine. Just go back to the fundamentals in that case. Ground yourself by feeling contact points with the chair. Breathe. Remember that you're not there to save, you're there to sit with them. Say things, for example, like, that sounds really difficult. I'm here for you. You don't have to experience this sadness alone. Maybe ask the 3 questions from Trauma Healing Institute. That's your job as someone who's trying to be there for your immigrant friend who's dealing with grief. So let's remember that immigrant friends are not defined by their hard stories, but their hard stories are part of them, and they often involve wounds that have not yet been healed. So in order to help your friend process grief and move toward healing no matter what, focus on being present. We're looking for a balance between prying and retreating into the privacy mindset of just give them space, somewhere between that. We can do this. By God's grace, we can be used by Him to share space with immigrant friends who are grieving wounds of the heart, and to make space for them to acknowledge their grief and heal. If you'd like to learn more about healing the wounds of the heart with an awareness of cross-cultural dynamics, I would highly recommend the Trauma Healing Institute's resources and trainings. I've put a link for their website in the episode description. And in this video, we've pretty much just scratched the surface of what trauma healing or healing wounds of the heart looks like in a cross-cultural perspective, but there's much more there for you to explore. May God bless you as you seek to be a good friend to your immigrant friends, and as you seek to make space for sharing of grief and for healing.